Hello. In today's tutorial, I want to show you and share with you my favorite books in astrology, the ones that I have relied on heavily throughout the years to teach me, to guide me through my own journey with astrology. Some of them I left behind more so than others, but even so, I still occasionally find myself going back to the very beginning just to kind of refresh my memory. And every time, actually, it's about seeing something from a different perspective for the first time. So even though I have divided what I'm going to share with you, and there are about 70 or so books that I'm going to share with you. I won't go into every single one in great detail, some more than others. But yeah, and I divided them in sections. So I'm going to start with foundational books that I believe are the best if you're a beginner, but also like they kind of have everything about everything. Therefore, it doesn't go too deep, some of them, but are kind of covering a lot and kind of everything you need at least to get you going. But also, they're always a little bit more than just basic. So I have a few foundational, and then I divided them by titles like houses. And in my case, there is there is actually a houses section. There are just about houses in astrology, then about aspects, techniques, retrogrades, since I have very many retrogrades, asteroids, Lilith, BML, relationships, astrology relationships, Moon, Venus, Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, and 12th house, Chiron, Pluto, and karmic astrology and archetypal astrology are the other last two headings. So karmic and archetypal are, well, they're not the same, but they're like in karmic astrology, I would imagine, or rather I would say, there is the language of archetypes is most prominently present than in other maybe books on astrology, where it's, so instead of saying planet Jupiter in other books, right, in karmic astrology or certainly archetypal astrology, that Jupiter would be referred to as an archetype. So there's that kind of difference. So like I say, about 70 or so books, and hope you will find this useful. And yeah, let me dive into it. So this is the foundational list of books. And like I said in my intro, that they're not necessarily basic. In fact, I wouldn't think any of them are basic at all. They might require you to have an understanding of astrology. And actually, with that in mind, I just want to say that when I started literally 30 or so years ago, I worked from a set of books by, I don't have them anymore. They must have lost in my recent move, the house move. But I have, they were in my mother tongue, in my other culture and country, where my other life, as it were. And I worked in a bookshop and they were there, and I bought them all. There was like 10 of them. And so that's where I learned the basics of astrology, the aspects, the houses, and just in such a kind of really well laid out. I remember finding out that there were two women, I'm pretty sure, and they were Aquarius. Both were Aquarius, which you will find Aquarius is the archetype of astrology. And Robert Hand, for instance, is an Aquarius. I'm not saying every astrologer is an Aquarius, of course, but yeah, I thought that was kind of neat. And since like in the last 10 years or so, well, not 20 maybe or something, I've been trying to find the English version of those books because my physical books were just kind of really almost disintegrated. So I wanted to replace them more, if anything, for just like memorabilia for me. But I could not find them. And yeah, maybe that was in the time of the internet when it wasn't so reliable, or you couldn't. Maybe if I try again I could, but like I said, I lost the books and I cannot remember the names of the authors. So anyway, so there's something that goes before this foundational list. So if you were my student, I would create the material for you probably anyway, but I would send you elsewhere. I'll probably have to look for other kind of more basic books. But so these foundationals are my foundationals. Like, they're so rich and quite in depth, quite not exactly, but quite in depth, because they're still very broad and they cover everything. So that's why they can't go necessarily so much in depth, but still. And yeah, so if you are relatively versed in the language of astrology, I would recommend highly, particularly the first one, A Spiritual Approach to Astrology by Myrna Lofthus, I think you pronounce it. And that's like a great reference book. Like every planet has its, and then there are aspects at the end. So she goes through, it's like a cookbook. It's very thick, it's quite big. And it goes to astronomy, and I don't think she goes to myth as well, but it's very complex. It has a lot of little detailed various dots within an archetype of a planet, even though I'm pretty sure she doesn't use the language of archetype, doesn't use the word archetype. But I remember, there's astronomy there, there's astrology, obviously, and various other kind of correspondences, and it's just really, really like a great reference book. Plus, you have a whole thick end of the book full of aspects between planets, and she actually goes into noviles, which is something, an aspect that I think it's a I can't remember the exact degree, but it's not something that found anywhere else really in any of the books on aspects. So if you're interested in all those like obscure aspects, she certainly covers them. Then Horoscope Symbols by Robert Hand is an absolute must. It's such a that is so rich and so potent, and just it covers everything. Again, it's like signs and houses and aspects, but it's just so beautifully written and so well written. Like, not so much beautifully, maybe it's not a literary piece, but it's as some writings can be literally beautiful. This one isn't necessary, but it's like a really well written, like you just so much fantastic information, and wise and intelligent and just wonderful. Astrological Insights into the Spiritual Life by Dane Rudhyar. This is a very thin book, and it's a gem. I would maybe not for a beginner. Again, if you're someone if you have a strong Gemini or Mercury conjunct Uranus, then I would say definitely go wild on any of these, and in no particular order, because you'll make connections kind of like in that instant, in that flash of insight and all that. So yeah, if you need more methodical approach to kind of building your astrology knowledge, then maybe leave this one for later stages. But it's it talks about, it's a very unusual book. It doesn't talk about astrology in the most classical sense, in most traditional way at all, even though it uses the words, Gemini and whatever words of the astrology, language of astrology. It's not even spiritual. I mean, it is, but it's not what we call maybe in the 21st century spiritual. This is an old book. I mean, he's a Pluto in Gemini generation, so go figure. He's quite, well, he's dead, I'm pretty sure, right? I'm not not making a major faux pas here, am I? Anyway, so it's a very thin book. I would buy it if you are a real passionate astrology enthusiast, and for yourself particularly, I would definitely buy it. It will give you some really quirky kind of angles to look at and consider aspects and houses mostly, and planets and signs. I mean, in slightly different way. Just language is not typically astrology. That's why it will make you kind of see it. It will just round something up for you, a concept that you might have just held on to too technically, were too kind of concerned about the technicalities of astrology. This book will give you this kind of round your knowledge up a little bit and soften it up a little bit. Planets in Transit is a phenomenal book. It's probably one of the ones that's just like, I don't have a Kindle version of it. I usually get eventually Kindle version because that's like indestructible, isn't it? But it's just so used up. I mean, it's written all over as the transits were happening for me. I literally followed it, just like as transits were going on in my life, and they obviously always are. So there was so much, and I was using it for planning ahead. It's just fantastic. So if you want to observe yourself as the planets are, as the transits are happening, get yourself Robert Hand Planets in Transit book if you like to have a reference always by hand, at hand, sorry, to refer to. Now, this is a gem, absolute gem. I have not I completely by accident found this author, which I'm not even sure if I can pronounce the name. This is one of those names I think I did Google him. I always do. Like, I want to know the author. I want to just know where this has come from. That's just me. And I remember he was saying that his name is like a Western name, like I think he's American, maybe English. I'm not sure. But I certainly got that impression. But the name is like when people change the name, if they're Buddhists or religion change, something like that. So anyway, Gargatolio, I'm not sure really how to pronounce it, and but it's a fantastic resource. I don't like the language always, like the way it's written is just a bit, I don't know what. There's something about it that it's a bit creaky, when something's not smooth and doesn't flow. There's something about it, but don't let that put, and personally it's just my personal take on it, so you might not feel the same, but it's so fantastically full of depth. There's something deep there and really rich in terms of content and what insight and wisdom. And even though it's kind of clunky at times the way it's written, so maybe he's not a writer as such, he's just like astrology. I don't know. Anyway, so introduction, I suppose. I can't remember what introduction was. Yeah. So, but I mean, the other three are an absolute must. So you want planets in signs, planets in houses, and planets in aspects. And it goes from, it divides it in like the shadow version, the insecurities, the transcendent expression of it. It gives you so much to work with. And I would absolutely always encourage you to use books like this, for instance, for transits as well. So if I don't know, Venus is currently in Virgo, and if you're kind of feeling a lot of self-judgment or self-criticism or perfectionism is in your way, for instance, today, right, this week, this month, then yeah, book like this would be great. Just look at what Venus in Virgo is, and then in what house. So look at where your Venus is, the Venus, the transiting, right, is what house in your chart it is in. So look at planets in houses, and then what this current Venus in Virgo is aspecting in your chart, and look at planets in aspects. And like I said, because the way it divides it, it's just fantastic. It really, it kind of makes you see clearly what you're tripping up over, and then what's your higher expression, what you should be aiming for if you want to get out of the rut. And it's just, so use all these books always for transits, even if they're not necessarily speaking of transits. And he also goes into inconjuncts. It doesn't go into all noviles, but it goes into inconjuncts, and it could be even, no, I think it's not quintiles, but it's certainly inconjuncts, and you won't find often inconjuncts are included in those cookbooks, but this one is, so highly recommend this Depth Astrology series. Then there is this book, which I haven't read as a book for anything other than for my own Taurus sign, and found it absolutely earth-shattering. And I have shared on my channels on Instagram, and maybe not so much on here, some nuggets of it. But in fact, there is an Instagram post where I created like a little visual for her wisdom that I never heard anyone else say before. And I'm pretty sure it's her. I think I quoted it there. Anyway, where Taurus is an integrated Scorpio. Any sign is essentially the integrated opposite. And that was years ago, and I just kind of never saw it in that way. So anyway, so that was one of the wisdoms. I'm pretty sure it's from this book. But other than that, so this book is, I don't know if it's foundational. Possibly is, in the sense that it does cover every sign. So in that sense, it's kind of foundational. And it is a bit, like I say, I only know about Taurus, but I never ever since or before read such complex depth and wisdom about Taurus archetype. And so I imagine it's for every other sign. I imagine. So it's kind of like a semi-recommendation, because it's purely, I only know it for my own sign. But if you have anything Taurus, particularly Sun, right, or Ascendant, because this is about the Ascendant rising sign, right, then, but also Sun, I would say. If you have Sun, even if you're not Ascendant Taurus, but you have Sun in Taurus, I would still, like, so, or any other sign, right, I would read your Sun sign, even if it's not your rising sign here in this book. I would imagine if she's as amazing as she was for Taurus, she would be for every other sign. then it's such an amazing book. Okay, so these are the books about houses. So they're all really good. They're just really good. So if you had to get one, I really wouldn't know actually. Just ask the question. I don't really know how to answer. Maybe 12 Houses by Howard Sasportas. Not sure. I mean, I seem to remember it being quite, not basic, but yeah, just not too complex, not too complicated maybe, or yeah, just easily graspable. Then Psychological Astrology in the 12th Houses by Noel Eastwood. I seem to remember this one particularly well. So yeah, if you follow me, I'm sure you will particularly, yeah, this one is probably my favorite. Houses, no, in fact, all of them. I remember now this one as well. Houses, Temples of the Sky. This is actually kind of like one that looks at very old, ancient astrology. This Deborah Houlding book, Houses, Temples of the Sky. So I remember, because I'm, my 12th house is a mystery, like every 12th house is, but I have Saturn there, I have Venus there, and I have Chiron, and my North Node is there, and in Pisces, and Neptune is my 7th house. So it's like I can't escape this kind of 12th house Neptune stuff. It's been in my life anyway. So I was always fascinated by my 12th house, and everything on 12th house I could get my hands on, I read. So in all of these houses, obviously, it was a lot on my 12th house too. But I remember particularly this book because she's the only one where she mentions that Saturn in 12th house is, how was it? Oh, there was this weird language, like archaic language. Hold on, let me try to remember. Yeah, I actually just found it in the book. So Saturn rejoices in this house, and of which, this is the sentence in her book, of which Lily is an old famous astrologer. I don't know which century, but it's like old other century. I can't remember the century. Sorry. For naturally, Saturn is author of mischief, etc. Anyway, so she goes back to almost history of astrology and brings up all these, and she has tables of like how a house was considered in ancient times and then medieval, then and she brings up the actual astrologers, like leading astrologers of those times. So it's really interesting in that sense if you're into that. But it's also, even if you're not into that, it's kind of, again, this is how my mind works, and what I love about studies and just knowledge and gaining knowledge and wisdom gaining activities that just go any place, and see what you can, even if it's not the title that directly corresponds to what you want, you will find so much. You will always find something that is such a gold nugget, and it might be kind of like the whole book, just one paragraph. Like, kind of, for me, this is the takeaway from this, from Deborah's Houlding's book, that Saturn rejoices in 12th house. My Saturn, that in every other astrology book is like, well, not in every other, and I'll have a special section on Saturn below. But for centuries that, or for however long, certainly in my life, whenever I read Saturn in 12, is like doom and gloom. And yeah, there's a lot of doom and gloom, but anyway. And then the 12 Astrological Houses by Dane Rudhyar, another love. I mean, he's just such an unusual writer, and just, yeah, I don't know how to describe him really, but it's kind of like not reading astrology, but at the same time, obviously it is, because yeah, he's talking about astrology, but it's just talks in I don't know, in a normal way, whatever that means. Normal is absolutely such a contentious word, but like mundane almost way, and yet it's not. It's actually not. It's yeah. I'll let you just make your mind up, and yeah. But I do like reading him for that kind of something else, a bit of a different experience of studying astrology. So these are the books on aspects, another astrological aspects about Dane Rudhyar again. So here I have 2 aspects. So for some reason I never really read much about aspects in general. It kind of, yeah, I don't know why that is, but I just didn't. I just kind of feel like, yeah, they're what they are. I mean, obviously there is depth and breadth of some, well, in my original studies, and that was enough for me somehow. So I never really studied at great length through books, but I certainly have done research online. I mean, which is absolutely endless, and just literally hours and hours and hours. God, I don't know how many I spent just researching astrology that way as well. So maybe I just didn't buy books. So Astrological Aspects by Dane Rudhyar, The Yod, but it's Esoteric Meaning by Joan Kellogg. So this, I don't know. I mean, it's again one of those books. I don't know, because it's esoteric, or which is a bit different than kind of. So you have esoteric rules and exoteric, and I'm not really an expert, but there is a difference there. And I don't know whether that's why, but again, the language of this book, and in general, I find astrology books can be quite dense, or just not particularly pleasant to read, like not easy to read. Yeah, a lot of good technical information, but there is a difference. There are a few authors, astrology writers, like astrologers that also write books, that are absolute pleasure to read. If you love reading, if you love words, if you love language, and you appreciate well-written pieces in any shape and format, on any topic, fiction, non-fiction, whatever, then you'll know what I mean, and you will have found your own writers, or So Dane Rudhyar would be somewhere in between, really. I can't say that I don't find his writing beautiful, but it's kind of quirky and unusual. So I don't know. I wouldn't say he's one of those denser writers, but I would definitely maybe say for this Joan Kellogg that her writing is just a bit, yeah, I don't know, just not great. Like, it's just chunks of information that doesn't flow necessarily. So it's not an easy read, but it's not difficult. It's not like you can't understand. It's just like, say, a bit clunky maybe. And Understanding Aspects, The Inconjunct by Alan Epstein. So he's got a whole series of aspects, basically. And I have the only aspect I have that's absolutely precise, well, not to a second, but to a degree, not to a minute, I mean, but to a degree, is Saturn Uranus Inconjunct. I have nothing else that's by the degree. So yeah, being Saturn should be everyone's planet to want to master. Yeah, so I was like, absolutely had to be studying. I suppose of all aspects, that's my favorite, and I'm most expertly on the inconjuncts. But yeah, I highly recommend if you have inconjuncts, want to understand, that's a good one. And then techniques. So these are secondary progressions, intercepted signs, and solar returns are the kind of 3 techniques that I have played with, and kind of went a bit deeper myself to study, to understand. And so intercepted signs, because I mean, every chart, maybe not every chart, but yeah, I wouldn't know that for sure, actually. But I would imagine most of us have intercepted houses and signs. So that's like when the whole sign is inside the house, and the house begins in let's say Leo, and then full Virgo is in that same, let's say, 5th house, and then the 6th house begins in Libra. So the whole of Virgo is inside the 5th house, and therefore the whole of Pisces is inside the 11th house, let's say. So those are your Virgo and Pisces are intercepted signs, and the houses, your intercepted houses, are 5th and 11th. And then because of that, you would have 2 houses. Oh, anyway, it's all, well, this is a great book. If you have intercepted houses, it's again just a bit a bit messy, in the sense that and recently I was looking at it, and it was like, okay, so I remember it being a bit scattered in terms of its layout and in terms of its but again, I remember vividly trying to find information on intercepted everything, signs, houses, whatever, and there's not a lot. So yeah, I was delighted to have found a book with just a book, basically. So it's like beggars can't be choosers kind of thing, but it's still full of fantastic information, so I highly recommend. And then planets all this will be a list at the bottom, sorry, so you don't have to, this is for me and for video screen or whatever. But yeah, this list will be in the description of the video. Planets in Solar Returns. So this by Mary Shee. So this is again a good one. In the sense that it's a cookbook again. So it's really interesting. It's like Solar Returns are interesting, and I love them. I really love them. Yeah, I'm looking as I'm doing this video, there are about 7 around me for the 7 next years of my own, obviously. So anyway, so I swear by them. They're such a potent navigators, and she goes into great depth and length, and just it's a great book. But again, I remember but that will be just everywhere and anywhere probably for you as well. Some books you relate, some of the stuff that how she interprets basically doesn't always resonate with me. I feel it's a bit, no, I wouldn't say that. I don't see why you're making that connection kind of thing. But again, that's always gonna be the case, somewhat to lesser or greater degree. But I definitely recommend the book. And then this is a book on retrogrades. Like I say, I have quite a few, and then therefore it's been an area of study, great deal of study. Retrograde, anything by Erin Sullivan is just fantastic. She's such an erudite. She's such a, I don't know what she studied. I think, I don't know if she studied, I don't think she studied astrology. Well, maybe she did that too, but I think she has like maybe PhD or something. I mean, I really don't know, so don't hold me on this. But like kind of classical studies, like philosophy, but also classical ancient Greece. Maybe even psychology. I'm not sure, but she's so erudite. She's so educated and writes really well. It's rich. It's dense. It's not too academic, but it's kind of borderline, which I like. I like academic writing because just I do Moon in 9th house, and in Capricorn. Anyway, but yeah. So Erin Sullivan, retrograde planets, definitely. And this is again the same one I was quoting here. I was listing here in the techniques for interceptions, because she talks about retrogrades as well. So your hidden powers, intercepted signs, and retrograde planets by Joan Wickenberg. And then on asteroids, so the book actually specifically on asteroid goddesses by Demetra George, and she talks about it's also a great book. She talks about mythology, and as you enter those kind of asteroids and lesser, air quotes, lesser planets or lesser whatever bodies, and so you'll find a lot of mythology, which I absolutely commend and love. And it's the way to really make your own. It's like, to understand the mythology behind all the archetypes is a sure way to develop your own interpretative skills. So asteroids, like I say, asteroids that she covers are Juno, Pallas Athena, Vesta, and Ceres. I'm not sure there's a fifth one. And then Lilith. Now, this is the densest book I have ever read. And there is a difference between Lilith and BML, Black Moon Lilith. And so I can't be sure. I used to know this, but because, like I said, I don't really care for these things. They don't, well, what matters to me is how I'm going to interpret something. How is it helping me interpret it? So this much helps me make an interpretative distinction between the two, Lilith and the Black Moon Lilith, or BML. So Lilith is more kind of impersonal. It's how we, it's almost like a Uranian, but far less. It's Uranian only in that kind of aloofness, but it's societal. It's more. It's impersonal. It's bigger than us. It's how we detach. It's like how we detach from whatever. Whatever being your sign, your house, the aspects. So but a healthy detachment, absolutely. Like how we maybe even how we individuate. So in that sense, Uranian. So it's not revolutionary. It's not an activist necessarily, like, it's not oriented towards society. It's oriented towards you in relation to the society. Yeah, you see the difference? So, if you want to understand your detachment mechanisms, or rather your attachment mechanisms, maybe even better put this way. So if you want to understand your unhealthy attachment styles, and I don't mean the traditional psychologically defined, and I can't remember now the list of them, the nervous, the anxious, I can't remember. Not those, although they probably could feature and be part of this interpretatively speaking. But so let's say you have issues with attachment one way or another, but in a sense of how you attach to things, not detaching, but attaching, right? So to understand how to heal that or how to cure that, you look to your Lilith. But Lilith that comes up in astro.com as just Lilith. So if you click on that, I think even if you don't click any of those additional bodies, if you watch my video how to make your own chart on astro.com, she comes up, and it's never the same, or it could be just by accident they're in the same sign or conjunct, but they're two distinctly different. I think they're bodies, they're asteroids. I'm not sure. That's the bit I don't really care much about. So they could be conjunct, but they're never the same. So BML is H13. Additional body, kind of, you put the ID of that, astrological ID identifier, right? Letter H, 13 all together, like number 13, right? That's your BML. Well, Lilith is, I don't know her number, she's just Lilith. Like I say, you can either tick her specifically, or if you do astro.com chart, I'm pretty sure she comes up even if you tick nothing. And she looks like a black crescent. In ephemeris, she also is like that, like a crescent moon, but the other way around, I think, with a little cross at the bottom. That's her glyph. So that's Lilith, not Black Moon Lilith. Black Moon Lilith, I don't think she has a glyph as such. Certainly not in the astro.com. When you get a chart, you just get literally, I think, Lil and then O. Anyway. But so Lilith, if you want to understand your Lilith, and your route to healthy detachment, get this book. You must get this book. It is phenomenal and so full of information and so full of wisdom and knowledge and research. And I mean, I love it. And yet I just literally had to, I had to ask, I think I was at the time even studying literature, English literature. So I was asking my colleagues, English speakers, natives, to maybe decipher the sentence. I literally couldn't make sense of some of her sentences. Never, ever have I come across such a dense writing. So not good, really, just frustrated the hell out of me. And yet it is so, I mean, I just knew there was so much wisdom there and power and knowledge, and so I highly recommend, if you want to understand how you can be free from emotional unhealth, right? Unwellness, sentimentality, emotionality, that it's just, if you feel like you're someone who is in throes of like your emotions rule you, you have no will to kind of stop that or change that. Understand your Lilith and get this book, Interpreting Lilith, by Delphine Gloria J. And I even tried to research her and contact her even. I think I was even going to email her if I could find her email to ask her to kind of just decipher this paragraph. Anyway. So, and the other BML, and the other Lilith, the Black Moon Lilith, is Lilith by Tom Jacobs. And so that's just because that's the only really book I know on Black Moon Lilith. Personally, the myth of Black Moon Lilith, who's the first wife of Adam, and then when he wanted to dominate her, she just said, no, we are equal. And she's actually the one who was made of the earth, right? The same matter that Adam was made, right? They were the ultimate couple, the first and the last proper, healthy, married couple. That's the kind of Libra Aries type of archetype, but in the healthiest expression. until one, like Adam, wanted to, like I say, dominate her. And she just said, nope, I'm off. I'm not interested in that. And then she was banished and became this evil woman, allegedly, because, you know, she was banished and all that. And God created Eve out of the rib of Adam. So almost like a lesser. So this Eve, the one that we all know, you know, and if you're Christian and follow that kind of dogma or religion or whatever, then you were taught that that's the wife, and that the whole idea of that's like a Juno asteroid, or, you know, compliant good wife, basically, because she, and not to mention codependency, right? So that's an unhealthy Libra Aries expression dynamic. I mean, she's literally dependent on him. I mean, she's part of him. She's not independent in that sense. She's made out of one of his parts. They're not equal in that sense. He's independent. It's almost like he gave birth to her anyway. So so that's Black Moon Lilith, and to me that's all I really kind of need to know when I'm interpreting, and whatever else there's more to the myth, and kind of have no time to go into now. But anyway, so this book is the only one I know that speaks of it, but it's okay. It's yeah, it's I suppose a good reference book. And this one is, the next section is on relationships. So Planets in Composites. In Composite is a great book, really good book. In all my time, I have never found, and relationships have always been the bane of my existence. Not romantic relationships, but friendships and work colleagues and family and all that. So this has been the biggest, and yet only found. In fact, what I'm saying, sorry, is that I never found a good synastry book. It would have to be a cookbook, if it was a book, or just a kind of generic explanation of synastries, and yeah, I've done all that and I've got quite a few actually, but as I read them, I found them just pretty thin, really just thin on the ground. So that's why I haven't included them. But I have actually owned probably about 5, but like I say, none of them really felt like they were up to scratch. So yeah, so that's why I haven't got any listed here. So my research and knowledge of synastries, I mean, it's actually in many ways far easier to grasp synastry and interpret it once you know how. It's kind of complex, but not necessarily. So it's like essentially having, and I have a video on that as well. So it's like looking at aspects. So it's your planet aspects the other person's planet. So you're basically focusing on the aspect, what the aspect means, and then, you know, depending on the planet, let's say it's his Mars and your Venus, so his masculine energies are doing something to your feminine energies, let's say your pleasure principle and his desire principle or something. So, you know, so you kind of just, yeah, and you go with interpreting it and the houses and all that. So in a way it's simple, but it's complex, but it's simple in principle of the interpreting it. So in a way I don't mind not having many, but it would be nice to have a good quality synastry book. But yeah, haven't found one yet. But this is composite, as I generally prefer composites as a way of understanding a relationship anyway. So that's another reason I was good not to worry about synastry. And Planets in Composite was my foundational book on relationships. It's like Planets in Transit by Robert Hand, and the same kind of model and the same layout and all that. And it's just fantastic, really, so exhaustive. And then Sky Mates, this is really interesting because it's from the karmic perspective. So that if you are, as I imagine most people are, fascinated by their relationships, you want to get both of these books and to understand the composite chart of you and whoever. And Sky Mates, like I say, focuses on past lives, like what you've been in the past life and how you're now working through those issues in this lifetime based on your composite. So it's really good. I love both of these books. Moon, sorry, just checking, I was recording. This is a lovely book. Really love this book. I have both a Kindle and a physical one. and Astrology of the Moon by Amy Herring. It's just so lovelily written. It's just, yeah, I love the way it's written. Like I say, it's such a joy to read, but also it's really wise and full of, just great information, great stuff, great insights and wisdoms, and for every moon, basically. I think, does she go into the moon, progress moon? I think she does. Yeah, it's a really exhaustive book on the moon, all things moon. In fact, sorry, just want to make sure I'm recording this. I don't want to have another instance where I just wasted good content. Anyway, so here are the chapters. Actually, I wanted to. So understanding the natal moon, the heart turns the head, the private self, the moon in love, mother moon, nurturing ourselves, the labor of love, emotional security, your comfort zone, the dark side of the moon, when your comfort zone becomes too comfortable, second childhood, emotional overindulgence, then the natal moon through the signs, so in Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, obviously through all the signs, then through the houses, first, second, then that's it, I remember it, understanding the progressed moon, introduction to progressions, the meaning of the progressed moon, your emotional attention, please, a new moon, combining the meaning of natal and progressed moon, chew on this, what do you need to feed your heart now, setting goals with the progressed moon, interpreting your progressed moon, emergence, experiencing a sign or house shift, the progressed moon through signs, then through houses, the natal and progressed moon, so that's a third chapter, third big chapter within, and then there are many mini chapters within it. So third, the natal and progressed moon, the moon and the planets, introducing aspects, interpreting aspects, note about orbs, moving aspects, the moon and the sun, moon and the Mercury, moon and Venus. It's just a phenomenal book, honestly. And that's it, life. And there's just, yeah, not going to list every single one, but as it goes through all the planets and then whole sign aspects, using the aspects guide, prep work, prerequisite for the Saturn return. It is such a good book. So highly recommend Astrology of the Moon by Amy Herring. Then Venus, book on Venus. This is really interesting. The Venus star point. And I can't say I read it. I read just mine. And it's really interesting because there's something there that is so unusual, like it's not like Venus through signs, even though it is. So it's about the star point as Venus goes, her retrograde stations create over a period of time. Again, this is when it comes to technicalities, I'm really not big on that. So she creates this famous star point or star, Venus star, right? And there is something about that. Basically, I can't go into it because I don't really know that part of it. That science, really, it's kind of like science. But basically, she explains it well, and you can basically figure out where your Venus. And this is the interesting piece because, like in my case, I have Venus in Aries, but there was something about it that was just different. It's not Venus in Aries; it's something else being born and being the morning star or the evening star or something. And it gives you just another take on your Venus, basically. So it's the only book on Venus I have. Again, this is one of the archetypes that I have got so much more depth and breadth of my understanding of Venus. And if there will be one day a video on that, don't know when, just by understanding the mythology of Venus. And yeah, Aphrodite or Venus, depending which. I would start with Aphrodite if I were you. And yeah, just amazing. So to me, that's more than enough. I didn't need any cookbook for Venus ever. But this one was interesting because it's a bit unusual. It's a bit different. It's not about just traditional. It's like placing your Venus somewhat differently than what you're used to maybe hearing about your Venus, right? This one is an interesting book, really. It's like, in a sense, the way it's kind of laid out, and it's just Jupiter in all kind of ways, like Science House. It's a cookbook. And it's good. Yeah. Yeah, that's all I have to say. So Exploring Jupiter by Stephen Arroyo. Now Saturn, as you can see, Saturn and 12th house, and then, sorry, just going to see which one has the most books, but probably Saturn and 12th house are there. Let me actually quickly count. Yeah, it's official. I have the most books on Saturn, and I think I haven't included all of them here. In fact, no, I haven't. I definitely haven't. Actually, I'm gonna include one more. Yes, I will include. So, I do have the most books on Saturn, and then this is probably just a third of what I have, if not maybe even more. Meaning I have even more than more than just 2/3 that are not listed here. But not all are great, and not all are to do with astrology. I have one book which is to do with Saturn and art world, which is just phenomenal, but it's again very dense. So I haven't read it myself, but I've been reading it kind of in and out, on and off. And then I have some like Saturnalia and like mythology of Saturn, and just maybe even some astronomy. Probably not too heavily, but and just the kind of Saturnian themes like death and which is essentially this is the death. The Saturn is really death, the end, where Pluto is death, at transformation through death. So it's transformation, right? Anyway, so and this is because anything we have in 12th house really is a mystery to us, and we are most drawn, I feel, based on my own life experience, but also other people's, and observing them and clients as well, that the 12th house are the most fascinating planets to us, what we have in 12th house. Or if we don't have a planet, then the whatever it's on the cusp, so they're archetypes. So if you have Taurus on the cusp of 12th house, then Taurus archetype might become, and probably later in life you become more conscious and aware of the mystery of what's kind of what you keep missing, that there is so much amazingness there. You just need to kind of get there, but that's never a straightforward journey when it comes to 12th house anyway. So anyway, I have Saturn there, plus it rules my skip step, and the chart ruler of my chart ruler is also rules my Saturn, so Saturn is the major player, and it's conjunct my ascendant. So yeah, hence the longest list here, but also the longest, the biggest book, the greatest number of books I have on Saturn, is another reason. So okay, so this one is Saturn Fatal Attraction. This is probably one of my first English books I read, I seem to remember, and in English, I mean, and yeah, it's I remember liking it, but I don't remember anything about it actually anymore, and I'm pretty sure it's kind of just, I mean, I have it, I can see it from here on my shelf, but I haven't got a Kindle version to quickly look it up. Anyway, so it's he's an English guy. He actually, I had a reading from him, and yeah, like I say, I remember liking it at the time, but I can't remember much more about it. And yeah, so that could be a book, right, that you might want to look. Now, of course, Saturn in Transit by Erin Sullivan is an absolute must. Absolute must to understand Saturn. Saturn, A New Look at an Old Devil by Liz Green, similarly. But the reason I always favor Erin Sullivan's book is because it talks hero's journey, and it kind of really draws clear parallels between the hero's journey, as per Joseph Campbell, and Saturn and transits, basically. And it has some good visuals there as well. Like I think I shared on one of my videos here when how to work with your Saturn return or something. Definitely, I borrowed a lot from her book. So that's why. But it's Liz Green is another phenomenal author, and both write similarly, in the sense of like rich academic, erudite way of looking at astrology. Liz Green, I feel, always is a little bit more psychology, where with Erin Sullivan is mythology. And so yeah, there's a distinction for me, at least. Saturn Spiritual Master, or Spiritual Master, I think. Anyway, by Robert Wilkinson is another great book. Great book. The other as well, The Little Book of Saturn by Eliza Einhorn. Just so fantastic, and all cookbooks really, but just they're more modern, like contemporary, I think, or am I just basing that on their design? And the language feels like lighter. With Erin Sullivan and Liz Green, you have that feel of like the academic world more than with Robert Wilkinson and Eliza Einhorn. It's more contemporary somehow. But all just fantastic books, really great books, cookbooks, so for all Saturn options and ways, signs and houses and aspects, and maybe not aspects with Eliza. Let me just quickly check that. So her chapters are basically, she goes like, what is astrology? So there is like a section of like general overall astrology, but then wise and patient Saturn is a section 2, or section 2, right? And there are 4 chapters in there. Who is Saturn? Saturn in the signs, Saturn in the houses, and the Saturn return. So no, she doesn't go into aspects. I was right. And Robert Wilkinson's, actually, I just realized as I was checking it that the title, I didn't get it right. That's why I was when I read it, a bit confused. So Saturn, Spiritual Master, Spiritual Friend by Robert Wilkinson. And it's such a rich as well, and it kind of not your typical cool book. So I'll just read out the chapter titles for you. There are how many chapters? 10. Making Friends with Saturn, How Astrology Works, Who and What is Saturn, Saturn, Dharma and Karma, Saturn, Guardian of the Ring Pass Knot. So ring pass knot anyway. Saturn transits and introduction, the Saturn cycle conjunctions, the Saturn cycle squares and oppositions. So this is so wonderful. It talks about cycles again with Saturn, and then that implies and means aspects basically. So those are the phases of Saturn cycle. Then chapter 8, the Saturn return. Chapter 9, the progressed moon, the Saturn cycle and critical life choices. This is the bit that is so unusual. I've never seen anywhere else, where they bring Saturn cycle and the progressed moon together. And then Saturn conjunct Pluto for everyone on Earth, 2003 to 220. God, can't read. 2003 to 2020 year, right? Anyway. So, highly recommend this book. Excuse me. Saturn Returns by Tom Jacobs, another good one. Tom Jacobs he really has a way of just getting to the heart of the matter. So his books are not, I don't know, I have only Kindle version, so I don't know how thick they are necessarily. But they're kind of, it's not like they don't give you a lot, but they really kind of narrow it down. In that sense, they don't give you a lot. And then the potency is that it is in that few words only. So he hits the nail on the head. But yeah, if you want elaboration on that nail on the head, if you like, that kind of nugget of the wisdom, you might not get that as much. At least that's how I experienced his books. But the nugget is there. Astrology of the Rising Kundalini by Barbara Hand-Claw. It's another good one. And this is the one it's just the Astrology of the Rising Kundalini. Let me just get it up, actually. The subtitle of Barbara Hand-Claw's book is The Transformative Power of Saturn, Chiron, and Uranus. So it's not just about Saturn, but it's about, like I say, Saturn and Uranus. Chiron and Uranus. It's a great book. It's so, again, exhaustive, and it's, again, just focuses on those 3 archetypes, but also on various cycles that, astrological cycles that are kind of life-changing. So her chapters are, I'm in midlife crisis now, the fundamentals of astrology, the Saturn principle in the cycles, so the Saturn principles in the cycles of life, then Uranus principle in the cycles of life, and Uranus and personal empowerment, Uranus and enlightenment, the Chiron principle in the cycles of life, more complex key life stages, Pluto square Pluto, second Saturn opposition, the polarities and as tools for activating 12-strand DNA, relationships and community, etc. More about our friend Saturn, so there's more about Saturn. And the cycles of Saturn to the rising sign, the double Saturn influence in your natal chart, and Saturn transits by quadrant in your birth chart, individuals and partner using Saturn for lifetiming, how to use Saturn placements in the birth chart to time your life, etc. So that's about it, basically. So yeah, it's about Uranus and Chiron, but I used it mostly, I think, for Saturn. And this is the book I added, Astrology, and it's specific only if you have Saturn in 12th, because I do, and it's been, like I said, the two have been the most persistent mystery in my life that I just kept trying to understand and studied to depth and death and back. So it's a really kind of weird book, really, and I think it's pretty thin. I have only Kindle version, but I remember it just like, and it's really written like full of grammar errors or typos or something. And yet, I mean, Stephen Newton McLean sounds like a English native speaker. So it's, I don't know, maybe it's just typos on terms of like publishing or whatever. Maybe it's self-published book. I'm not even, I don't know. It's an odd book. If you have Saturn in 12th and you want an odd book on Saturn in 12th, that actually has a lot of, I mean, I have read it a few times. I mean, it's like a, you know, while you drink your coffee, you can read it. It's that short. But it has some outrageous, outlandish connections it makes between things, but just the fact that Saturn is in 12th. I think one is like, I'll never forget. And yet it really at times, like I remember it and I think, well, maybe. And I kind of feel like, well, maybe that's, yeah, I can relate to that. Is that there are two, when you have Saturn in 12th, it's like there is a master, ascended master, and version of a soul in the same body of a not so evolved other soul. I mean, yeah, I don't know. It's kind of ridiculous, but at the same time, yeah, I don't know. When I'm, torn in between, or when there's a little me and there is a big me, I can relate to that. But it's almost like astrologically, I just really don't get how he drew that. Where did that come from? Unless it's something channeled or something, I don't know. But I don't see a connection with astrology as I know it with Saturn even. Saturn, if anything, Saturn's not duality. I mean, he's part of the duality, or like he's the matter, and then there's stuff beyond matter and e-matter or whatever. Immaterial Neptunian realms, obviously 12th house, right? So yeah, but it is not 12th. Anyway, I don't know. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe I just answered it. I don't know. Anyway, but if you do have Saturn in 12th and you're puzzled by it, yeah, get this book. It's like I say, it's tiny. It's it'll be a curious read. And then 12th house is another area that I certainly have, have just I lived there basically. That's literally my house number is 12. Our new home, which we lived in for the last 2 years now, I think, or just under. And I thought it was just wonderful synchronicity. And I certainly feel like I live my 12th house more than any other. Even now, and in a kind of way that it's far more fulfilling. And I should have hoped so after all these decades of not just studying, because you can't really 12th house. They can never master it in a way that would make sense to an earthling, but including my own version of an earthling, but still. So anyway, and obviously Neptune is kind of like the same in this sense. I do feel Neptune is the same. Pisces, not necessarily. Well, yes, but depends where you have Pisces. And really, I feel like Pisces in another part of the chart, not in 12th, or not in Neptune, meaning not your, yeah, you have to be pretty young to have Neptune in Pisces, and then something your personal conjunct there. So, but yeah, that's kind of my personal take on it. That having Pisces might not make you as 12th housey or even Neptunian-y, not to the same extent, I feel. So yeah, anyway. So the books I recommend are your this is a fantastic one, but this is a beginner's kind of level, I feel. It's pretty straightforward, and it has some great examples and great little gimmicky things, almost like. So it's called Your Secret Self, Illuminating the Mysteries of the 12th House by Tracy Marks. Neptune, the 12th House, and Pisces by Maurice Fernandez is another really good one. I think it's I can't remember whether he does talk about this in his book. I'm pretty sure he does. But there is another, well, it's not even just a book, even though I'm sure there maybe is a book on that topic as well. But there is a couple famous for doing a research on, and I don't even think the couple is actually, they're astrologers. I think they're just some kind of psychologists. So I'm not sure. They maybe have included astrology. Anyway, so they were doing a research that, and they found that if you have planets in those so-called cadent houses, so they're 12th, they're 4th, they're 7th, and they're 10th. Or are they 9th? No, no, 12th, 3rd, 6th, and 9th. The ones, I'm pretty sure, yeah, the ones that are just before the cardinal houses. Yeah, but I do remember that the 12th house is definitely is a cadent house, and when you have whatever planets you have in those houses, the cadent houses. Yeah, I just checked. I was right. It's 12th, 3rd, 6th, and 9th are the cadent houses. So planets you have in those houses. This couple found that these people become famous for them, or that those planets, those archetypes that they have in those houses become kind of like their life purpose, or what they dedicate their life to, their life's work and all that. And I think Maurice Fernandez touches on that in his book, I think. 12th house being one of those houses. Then the Astrological Neptune and the Quest for Redemption by Liz Green, another great book on Neptune. Then the Book of Neptune by Stephen Forrest, another great book, like easy reference point. He's really great to read. It's just so easy. I mean, it's just so kind of chatty and funny. It's really funny as well. I find it funny. And then Neptune Whispers from Eternity by J.W. Green. I mean, with Jeffrey Wolf Green, as much as I'm so respectful and grateful for his work with evolutionary astrology completely, I just found his style of writing is just so yeah, I don't enjoy reading his books, even though I read them because they're so full of, again, so much information and wisdom and insight and absolutely fantastic. It's just such a drag. It's just, I don't know, just energetically the language is just so kind of boring, but that it's just, so this is his lectures. So it's kind of like, yeah, I don't like those styles of books, but yeah, it's I did use it for my own research and for just studies, but so you can find, but it's a bit tedious, getting through stuff to get to the actual nitty-gritty of stuff, of the information you're actually after. So yeah, so if you're a fan of J.W. Green, obviously, then you'd love it, but I'm not, in terms of his writing, really don't enjoy it. And then on Chiron, so The Healing Journey by Melanie Reinhardt, just phenomenal, just a must-have if you want to study your Chiron, a must-have. Chiron 2012 and the Aquarian Age by Tom Jacobs, another really, he's kind of done something that I haven't heard anyone do before rather, which is he talks of Chiron as an energetic sensitivity, which is that sensation when something is squirmingly painful and just like, oh, you just can't bear it. It's just like, that's your Chiron, but that's your energetic sensitivity. And so yeah, it's worth a read, that book. if nothing else, just the beginning, the first few chapters where he talks about this concept. And then obviously your sign and aspects and the houses is another cookbook. Chiron, the Rainbow Bridge Between the Inner and Outer Planets, another great by Barbara Handclaw. And then obviously, I didn't include it here, but it's The Astrology of the Rising Kundalini by the same author, where she talks about Chiron and Uranus. And then Pluto volume on Pluto, Jeff W. Green is an absolute authority, really. So I would Pluto volume 1 is for individual chart, and Pluto volume 2 is in relationships. So you need to have your composite chart done, and then you see where your Pluto is. It's fantastic. It's an absolute must. I mean, yeah, I still don't enjoy reading. It's just so, like I say, dense and but I do, because there's so much goodness there still. The Book of Pluto, another great one. It's a cookbook and it's fantastic. It's just so good. It's a fantastic book. And Healing Pluto Problems by Donna Cunningham is another good one. She's recently-ish passed away, but yeah, she's just a great book. And then Karmic Astrology. So I just want to quickly mention the Healing the Soul by Mark Jones is also about Pluto, but it's about Uranus and lunar nodes. So I put it under Karmic Astrology, but it could be used for Pluto too. And so yeah, so this is like basically looking at astrology, considering that there is a soul essence to us that is present in all of our past lives. So there's another assumption and premise there, that there are past lives that we reincarnate. So that's the karmic part of the astrology of this list of books, is that they assume that we have reincarnated and we will be incarnating again, and we have incarnated many times before, and this journey can be traced and the lessons via lunar nodes, and in evolutionary astrology with Pluto, in a slightly different way. So yeah, so this is, if you're into that, and I certainly am, obviously, then any of these books are fantastic. So Karmic Astrology, Retrogrades and Reincarnation by Martin Schulman. That's kind of an old book, but it's a pretty thin book. I wouldn't say, if you have all the others and you fancy some more, yeah, get it. It's a good little book. But I'll tell you in a moment which are the absolute must-haves if you want to understand your karmic story. North Node Astrology by Elizabeth Spring is a good one. It's definitely a good one. But again, I seem to remember the way it's written is just a little bit too chatty. Somehow I remember it's a pretty thick book, and the kind of, I would have edited it to trim out a third of it, so to kind of keep it more punchy and to the point. There was something about that when I haven't revisited in a while now, but it was one of the first books I had on this, and so I read it at least a couple of times. But I remember it being a little bit like that, a bit drawn out. And then an absolute must is Astrology of the Soul by Jan Spiller. An absolute must. If you want to understand your nodes, South and North Node, you must read this book. Well, not the book, but just your actual your site, your nodal axis. So it's an absolute must. Healing the Soul, like I say, by Mark Jones, which is also about Pluto and Uranus, but lunar nodes as well, is another great one. He's Pluto in Virgo generation, like myself, so it kind of is a bit too detailed almost, and like Pluto in Virgo can be. And so I found it a little bit slow going for me. I wish again I would have edited it, but it's great. I mean, yeah, it's really quality book. Soul Speaks is another by him. This is the therapeutic potential of astrology. That's the subtitle. And basically, it's kind of like, I suppose, if you're an astrologer, if you want to be an astrologer, it's a good one to read. It's kind of how to work with clients, but it's not really a self-help book in that sense. And I can't say I spent much time on that, because by the time this was a relatively recent purchase of mine. By recent, I mean 10 years maybe. And but then I was already a coach, an NLP practitioner, a teacher, having those kind of therapeutic functions and providing those services to others already. So I didn't feel I needed that so much, but I was using it mostly for the signs. Then Saturn, he has a section on Saturn specifically, guardian of our true potential, and the outer planets, the developing self, Saturn and Uranus cycle. So it's really great, even if you're not interested in being an astrologer as such, to do it, to read it for those other. So the first two chapters are about how to be a good astrologer, how to be a therapist type of thing, where the others are all about Saturn, Uranus, and just outer planets, which is Saturn, Uranus, Pluto, Neptune. Actually, no, Saturn doesn't come, he's on the border. He's Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus are the outer. And yeah, like I say, the 12 Steps to Healing is the signs, yeah. So that's Soul Speaks by Mark Jones, and Lunar Nodes by Celeste Teal is another one. That's a quick and easy, and it's good for composite. Synastry. So the lunar nodes, kind of in general, then by house position, lunar nodes by house position, by sign position, your karmic control planets, nodal aspects to inner planets, so it's about aspects as well. Nodal aspects to outer planets. She considers Jupiter and Saturn outer. I wouldn't, but okay. And then progressions and nodes, the transiting nodes, transiting planet in aspect to the nodes, 12 nodes in the solar returns. Sorry, that's a chapter 12. Sorry, nodes in the solar returns. Nodes is synastry. That's the one, nodes in synastry. And that's it. So she does for relationships as well. So when you have nodes in synastry, sorry. And then what else? Understanding Karmic Complexes by Patricia Walsh. Now, this is not astrology directly, although she does reference astrology. But it's a fantastic book. It's a phenomenal book. It's basically Patricia Walsh is an astrologer, but she's also a regression counselor or therapist or hypnotist. I'm not sure the exact title. But basically, she helps people go back to their, revisit their past lives, regress, and then heal in doing so, and takes them on their journey. And it's, so if you want to understand how the regressions work, but also, and she does make a point to tell us about the signs, whether it's nodal signs or something, probably nodal or Pluto maybe. But she does reference astrology. Like I say, it's not about astrology so much, but it's about how just full of examples of those stories to show that whatever we are struggling with in this lifetime on such a crippling level, on intense level, is basically rooted in some trauma in the past life that we need to resolve, which in itself to me was just, I remember reading those examples, was enough to kind of get myself off the hook and not to have so much more compassion for my own, even though I didn't do a regression ever. I know what my issues are that are so not rooted in this lifetime. The extent to which there's issues or have been issues is ridiculous. It just does not compute. There's nothing in my life that warrants the extent to my reactions when it comes to certain things in life, certain setups, certain dynamics, certain whatever. And that's rooted. To read this book was like over and over and over, I was affirmed that's a long lasting trauma that I don't remember directly or some of it I kind of do in a way, cellularly or energetically. I can piece the story and the puzzle, but not like as a clear memory. That literally I had a memory as such. Although sometimes I felt I did maybe as well. Anyway, it's just kind of reading the book was affirming that over and over again in all the stories, that those excessive reactions, extreme pains, and extreme issues belong somewhere else. So to have compassion, not to try to fix yourself in the way that maybe psychology offers and tools that we know them rather, but to just consider that it's coming from somewhere far beyond, and that in itself takes some edge off it for me. At least it did. So, and Yesterday's Sky by Stephen Forrest is, or as the subtitle is, Astrology and Reincarnation, is basically about, again, lunar nodes and planets conjuncted, or opposing or squaring in aspects to it. Basically, it's another great book. Really highly recommend it. And finally, before my voice gives up on me totally, Archetypal Astrology. So really, as you have heard me so many times mention this, The Archetypal Universe by Ren Butler is just, if you want to understand, my voice is giving up now. So if you want to go beyond the sort of language of astrology as it's most conventionally and used, as in, Venus is a planet, and go beyond square versus opposition versus inconjunct, or trine versus sextile versus conjunction, or then, so it is in a sense advanced, because the nuances between different aspects are important when you're reading a chart, and when you're as a professional astrologer, but beyond that it really isn't. And this is why I think on some occasions I've said that really you don't need to know astrology at all to either watch my videos or to read this book, for instance, or to even know what your Venus square Jupiter means versus your friend's Venus opposition Jupiter. You just go, in this book, you just go to Venus-Jupiter combination, or if your Venus is in Sagittarius or your Venus is in 9th house. So you need to know some correspondences there, obviously, that, Jupiter, Sagittarius, and 9th house are the same thing, or that the squares and oppositions are the hard aspects that are more difficult, therefore will trigger far more shadow. But even that is not exactly clean-cut, really, division by definition, right? And it's just, I'll leave it at that anyway on this occasion. So you need to know some correspondence, like I say, but if you do know them, then you go to Venus and Jupiter in this book, and you'll have a section on shadow, and you have a section on light, and you have some other sections on art, and just the language is so beautiful and so rich in this book. And you will go, oh my God, yes, you can just feel it viscerally, that would be the highest expression of your either Venus in Sagittarius or Venus with Jupiter. And you will know instantly and instinctively all the crap that you have harbored and kind of accumulated by, your Venus Jupiter shadow. And there you go. There you have a book that clearly, spells out the two, and you can then bridge them. You can make a journey from the shadow piece to this higher vibrational expression of the archetype, and you make that journey. Literally, you draw it out, like how you plan it. Like, how do I move from this to that? Or as I do it usually when it comes to this book in particular, I would draw both and two separate columns, if you like, the shadow column and the light, or however I call them. Don't call them that, but anyway. And then I would kind of be aware of the shadow, and as soon as it comes up in me, I'll just go, there it comes, and I would just sit with it, let it talk to me or whatever. But in the meantime, I'll be looking at the good stuff, the higher vibrational thing, and I'll be I don't have currently anything this week, this month, but up until a year or two ago, I had always some version of something in terms of my transits, like plastered on my wall or above my desk or something, the high vibrational version of that archetype, of that transit that I'm going through, or the progress stuff that's, or usually longer term things, like they're going to last at least a year, so I have a whole year to work on it. And it's like a reminder of how to be, and then you just eventually slowly start seeing yourself actually become that person or that expression. So I use Ren Butler, the archetypal universe, in that way. And Pathways to Wholeness is a Kindle version of this, but it's not the same book, but it's very similar. And it has the same sort of content, and I love my Kindles. And Prometheus, the Awakener by Richard Tarnas is another fantastic book. It's essentially about Uranus and Aquarius, and I highly recommend it these days, as when we are either already in Aquarian age or are going to be, once Pluto joins there. We are, well, with Saturn as of next year, Saturn and Jupiter, and then when Pluto follows a few years later, there's no coming back. So read this. It's a very thin book. It's academic-ish but it's really well written. Richard Tarnas is wonderfully writes wonderfully. Sorry, and yeah, it will kind of help you with Pluto-Saturn conjunction we had to understand what's being asked of us. How we're meant to move from the Saturnian, Capricornian, Pluto in Capricorn essentially times. But also away from Piscean age, which in this book Richard Tarnas doesn't talk about. It's more present in the Ren Butler when he talks about the Groff perinatal matrices, which is at the beginning of the archetypal universe, which is very non-astrological, but it's worth a reading. It might be, I don't know, it might not be, might be a bit too something advanced, I'm not sure, but anyway. But yeah, so Prometheus, the Awakener book is about the Aquarius. The book is not about the Aquarian age, but it's about the archetype of Aquarius and Uranus, and which is the Awakener. And Richard Tarnas actually talks about the myth of Prometheus, how it's far more appropriate for us to use that myth to understand the archetype of Uranus and Aquarius, even though Uranus is kind of the myth of the husband of the Gaia. So he was the gods of heaven, and then Gaia was the earth god of earth, and Saturn was one of their kids, I think. I can never remember those. Sometimes those familial connections are all, well, intertwined in the old Greek pantheon. So anyway, and how that old myth doesn't really resonate with the Aquarius archetype. So Prometheus, hence the Prometheus myth. Anyway, so that's it. Hopefully that's all I have for you. Hopefully this was all helpful and useful, and I did record, and I shall see you next week.